Hi, I'm Nat, and this is Alt Classics, the show where we find replacements for classic movies. Though I might be on the wrong set. When I was a kid, my dad and I had very different taste in movies. In fact, we still do. I like well-paced plots and sharp dialogue, and he likes explosions. But that made it really special when we found a movie that we both loved and could share. Today, we're going to be looking for an alternative to the action-adventure classic that started it all, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Raiders is the story of Indiana Jones, an archaeologist who travels the world recovering lost artifacts. After a brief but iconic side quest in South America, Jones returns to the United States and is hired by the government to recover the Lost Ark of the Covenant, a sort of holy superweapon. Jones must beat the Nazi team looking for the Ark in the Egyptian desert, which is led by rival archaeologist René Belloc and Gestapo officer Arnold Todt. Indiana is helped by his goddamn partner, Marion Ravenwood, and Egyptian excavator Salah. The good guys find the Ark, lose the Ark, steal the Ark, and are finally captured as they try to escape with the Ark. Belloc opens the Ark, releasing an angel of death who kills the assembled Nazis. The feds take possession of the Ark, which leaves Indiana and Marion with nothing better to do than day drink.
Buy a drink.
George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, and Philip Kaufman all contributed story ideas to Raiders of the Lost Ark, which were cobbled into a functioning script by the peerless Lawrence Kasdan. Raiders of the Lost Ark and the entire Indiana Jones franchise are swashbuckling romances with a real sense of playful fun. Even though they're concretely set in World War II, they have this timeless lust for adventure that you can find in the works of Jules Verne, Robert Louis Stevenson, or Emma Orsi. So, as we search for our alternate this episode, it's more relevant than ever to look backwards. After all, Spielberg and Lucas have never been shy about their influences in previous media. Popular 1940s serial films inspired Raiders' plot and aesthetic, while 1954's The Secret of the Incas is a direct ancestor of Indiana Jones' signature look. Unfortunately, all of these films valued their marketability above good storytelling, so let's not waste too much time. There is one obvious candidate to replace Raiders of the Lost Ark: Robert Zemeckis' Romancing the Stone. They were both released in the 1980s. They're both adventure films about the search for a lost artifact. They both start with R. Michael Douglas's Jack Colton certainly bears more than a passing resemblance to Indiana Jones, although technically Colton is secondary to Kathleen Turner's Joan Wilder. There's just three problems with picking Romancing the Stone as our alternate. It's a little too comedic, it's a little too famous, and it's bad. Romancing the Stone is a bad movie. It's bad. I did not like it. It's not bad because I didn't like it. It's bad because it's bad. Not poorly made, just bad, as in shouldn't have been made. As in it's a bad movie, and the world would be a better place if it had never happened. I just blacked out for 30 seconds. Fortunately for us, Romancing the Stone is a bad alternate for many of the same reasons that my actual pick is a good alternate. So we're gonna play with the format a little this week and compare all three movies: Raiders of the Lost Ark, Romancing the Stone, and Quigley Down Under. In the 1860s, American sharpshooter Matthew Quigley arrives in Australia to work for Elliot Marston. On his way to Marston's ranch, Quigley gets into a fight with Marston's men when he defends fellow American Crazy Cora. Cora attaches herself to Quigley, claiming he is her estranged husband Roy, and accompanies him to the ranch deep in the outback. At the ranch, Marston surprises Quigley by revealing he has not been hired to shoot dingoes, but the local Aboriginal Australians. Quigley declines Marston's job offer. Marston's men beat Quigley brutally and leave him and Cora in the outback to
let Australia kill him.
After they're saved by a group of Aborigines, Quigley and Cora survive, defend the Aborigines, and exact revenge on Marston. Released in 1990, Quigley Down Under received mixed critical reviews and barely made back its budget. It's a shame because the movie has a lot to offer, especially when rewatching today. By contrast, Romancing the Stone was a financial success and received positive contemporary reviews, but it's aged about as well as Steven Seagal's leathery gunt. These three movies share so much DNA and yet arrive at such different end results. Kinda like me and my dad. The most obvious examples are the three male leads. If we put Indiana Jones on a spectrum from asshole to angel, Jack Colton and Matthew Quigley would fall rather nicely on his left and right. Colton takes Indiana's worst qualities and runs with them. He's a duplicitous creep who's happy to leave Joan Wilder to die as soon as saving her becomes inconvenient. Even once they become friends, he's lying to and manipulating her. The movie wants us to believe he's changed by the end, but even if he has, it hasn't cost him anything. Quigley, by contrast, is a gentleman to a fault. He's kind to others and will do the right thing, even when it hurts him. Quigley doesn't even want revenge against Marston, until Marston's men massacre innocent bystanders in their pursuit of Quigley. While all three men are handsome adventurers who survive by their wits, their behavior and choices reveal enormous differences. Also, this is a small thing, but Quigley's sniper rifle plays a similar role to Indiana's signature whip. It's multi-purpose, a melee weapon, a ranged weapon, an escape route, and so on. Anyway, just a small thing. The three female leads have less in common, but a comparison is still revealing when you look at their function in the story. Marion Ravenwood is by far Indiana Jones's best love interest. She's smart, tough, and funny. Karen Allen has charisma and star power for days. My only complaint about Marion is that she doesn't get a lot of active choices. The big decisions that she makes are often negated immediately afterwards by outside events. Since Romancing the Stone is ostensibly about Joan Wilder, you would think she would make plenty of active choices. You would think. Joan starts out as an interesting character, a shy romance novelist with a bad memory and a big liquor cabinet, and when she's called to South America to save her sister, I was excited to see how she would change and develop. But as soon as she arrives in Colombia, Joan acts like an incompetent tourist and is buffeted from one plot point to the next. By contrast, Quigley Down Under's Cora has a compelling character arc of her own, completely separate from her relationship to Quigley. While Quigley is what K.M. Weiland calls a flat art character, check out the Just Right video in the description for a fantastic exploration of that term, Cora goes through many changes as she reckons with her grief, loss, and abandonment. She's a surprisingly well-developed character for any action movie. One of Quigley Down Under's greatest strengths is the romantic arc between these two leads. Raiders puts its love story at a disadvantage by separating Indiana and Marion for a good chunk of the movie, and what time they have together isn't always spent developing their relationship effectively. Obviously, that's not the primary focus of the movie, but Harrison Ford and Karen Allen have too much chemistry to waste. Romancing the Stone's love story is front and center, but I almost wish it wasn't. Jack Colton and Joan Wilder seem to fight or hop into bed as the plot demands, rather than the plot deriving from these characters and their choices. They also have an incredibly unhealthy relationship, but that's a whole conversation. Quigley and Cora start off rocky. Quigley is aggravated that Cora insists he's her husband Roy and rejects her advances because
I ain't sharing my bed till I'm certain you know who's in it.
However, as they're forced to depend on each other to survive, Quigley and Cora develop a mutual respect, then understanding, and finally love. It's partly just that Quigley Down Under has the time to spend on their relationship because they're together for most of the film. But as Romancing the Stone proves, you can have all the screen time in the world and still end up with a flat story. So we've got our protagonists and our deuteragonists, which leaves the antagonists. Raiders sees Indiana face off against René Belloc, who aptly describes himself as,
I am a shadowy reflection of you.
He's the sort of dark reflection antagonist that highlights the protagonist's better qualities. If two characters are so similar, what makes one of them the hero and one the villain? In Raiders' case, it's a matter of principles. Belloc is willing to make any compromise to achieve his selfish goals. After all, he's a Frenchman collaborating with the Nazis. Indiana is an idealist who believes in uncovering the facts for the sake of scientific research. He states it a little more clearly in The Last Crusade.
That belongs in a museum!
Romancing the Stone has two sets of antagonists, the bumbling smugglers Ralph and Ira, and secret policeman Colonel Zolo. While Ralph and Ira kickstart the plot by kidnapping Joan's sister, they're largely relegated to a comedic subplot. Zolo, on the other hand, is creepy and menacing, and very little else. He has a lot more in common with Raiders' secondary villain Arnold Topp, but with no personality. Look, not every villain has to be nuanced, but if you're gonna write a one-note bad guy, pick a good note. Zolo, he's just a racist character straight out of a Nancy Reagan fever dream. More on that later. In Quigley Down Under, and in most of his other movies, Alan Rickman steals the show with his villainous portrayal of Elliot Marston. Marston is obsessed with the American West and cites the United States genocide of American Indians as the inspiration behind his massacres of the Aborigines. He sees himself as Australia's Wild Bill Hickok, the lone gunman bringing civilization to the savages. In his establishing scene and the film's climax, Marston stages quick-draw shootouts straight out of Louis L'Amour. Contrasted against real Wyoming cowboy Matthew Quigley, Marston is a dark reflection not only of the protagonist, but of American concepts of masculinity. Marston is what happens when you want to look like a man, but don't act like a good one. More than any other characters, Zolo and Marston reveal their film's perspectives on their respective settings. As I said before, Zolo is little more than a racist caricature, and that small-minded bigotry permeates the entire movie. Romancing the Stone is set almost entirely in Colombia, and yet there are only 2 Hispanic characters with names, Zolo and Juan, who is a lovable and hilarious drug kingpin. You know, like Pablo Escobar. The entire country is portrayed as theme park ride jungles and quaint little villages, with more drug humor than is medically advisable.
Oh, marijuana.
Oh, you smoke it?
I went to college.
Before anyone defends this movie because it was released way back in 1984, just remember that 1984 is the same year that Rodrigo Lara, Colombian Minister of Justice, was assassinated on Escobar's orders. I could go off all day about how racist Romancing the Stone is, but I'll just close with this clip of Danny DeVito's character calling the Colombian police
in some kind of spicko military compound.
Now, Quigley Down Under is not some paragon of progressive politics. The only major Aboriginal character is Marston's manservant Kunkura, who's treated largely as a symbol of all Aboriginal Australians. That and the occasionally mystical portrayal of the Aborigines are definitely problematic, even if they're meant to be sympathetic. But Quigley Down Under's saving grace is its explicitly anti-imperialist tone, which we see in Marston and secondary antagonist Major Ashley Pitt. As a wealthy landowner and an upper-class army officer, these 2 villains represent the major perpetrators of British imperialism. Other than Quigley himself, all of the sympathetic characters come from traditionally marginalized groups: women, people of color, and immigrants. Raiders of the Lost Ark is always going to be a classic action-adventure movie. But there are so many different directions you can go within that genre. So the next time my dad and I sit down with a bowl of popcorn, I'm gonna put on Quigley Down Under. It's a fun and exciting action movie with more brains than you might initially suspect. Plus, it's easier to enjoy a movie from the 80s or 90s if you aren't constantly rolling your eyes at the aspects that haven't aged so well. For All Classics, I'm Nat Roberts. See you next time.